It's another edition of Musical Shenanigans. Welcome to show number 7, sponsored by Big Richard's Meataporium and Fine Dining. Tonight is the Pretentious Show, where we become public defenders for random albums and battles of amazing wit, sheer strength, and the tremendous nonsense you come back for every time as we cross swords in your ears. All right, welcome back. This is Cory.
And this is Dave.
And this is Scott. Praise Satan.
Yes, praise Satan. And we are back again, Musical Shenanigans, and we're changing the format. Once again, we're trying to make it a little bit more interesting, not just for you, but for ourselves.
Yeah, we're going to play around a little bit this week and try something a little bit different. So for those of you who have been listening for a few shows now, you've heard us get on and just sort of like run our mouths about these albums and give you our opinions on them. This was ultimately a ranking, right? Rolling Stone ranked these albums, and that's what we haven't been doing. And so we thought it might be interesting to maybe come at this from a slightly different angle and see if we can actually put some of these albums up against one another and see if we can come up with our own sort of end of the day ranking. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a little debate about them. The way this is going to work is one of us will take the lead on making the case for one album. The other one will take the lead on making the case for the other album. And since there are three of us, the third person will then act as the judge and make the final determination between these two albums, which one is the better album. The idea is hopefully we get down to a final two, and when we're all said and done, we'll have our own little ranking that may line up with what Rolling Stone did, and it may not. Cory, you want to talk about the albums we're going to be talking about this week?
So the albums this week, we'll start from the top, will be Frank Ocean, Blonde, will be competing against The Clash, their debut album. The second round will be The Who with Who's Next against the band Music from Big Pink.
I won't even say it.
It's too easy.
It is.
It's too easy.
Pink is the color, guess the flavor.
It's low-hanging fruit.
Here we go. Back to the Skittles. All right, round one, we will do Frank Ocean and The Clash.
Should I stay or should I go now?
Oh,
so
sorry.
let's talk about the rules of engagement here real quick. Advocate number 1 will come in and lay out the case for their album. You will have 2 minutes to make your opening statement, at which point we will go to advocate number 2, who will make his case for the album he is representing. And then after that, we'll set aside 5 or 6 minutes just for the same sort of open talk and discussion that you're used to having us here. And then we'll take a little bit of a break, and then I will come back in this round. It will be me acting as judge, so I will come back and render my verdict. That being said, gentlemen, are we ready to go here? Do you have your case briefs ready to go?
Yes, briefs are on.
I am not wearing briefs, but I'm ready.
Okay, do you have a preference on who goes first or second?
I defer to you, sir.
You can make the decision, just like in a football game. Do you want to play or defer?
He goes first.
Cory, you may begin.
I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, before I begin my statement, before you start your timer, that I did take the time to fully consider this in, great thought, great meditation, and felt that only this could be told in iambic pentameter.
All right, your funeral counselor.
Oh, for love of the punk and of the Clash. Strummer Joe, Simonon, and Split Drummers, named of toy crimes and topahedron, a debut album for all to rejoice. For of other albums ye shall not hear, 'tis art I hearken above all else this night. By compare, others are but cheap harlots. For this, good sirs, is the best of the very best, and I beseech you to discount such knaves. A knave named Frank Ocean he calls himself, to stand among those with instruments in arms, and heavy planks of wood in their grand hands. He is but a pinprick in the night sky, vying for ardor in the bright moonlight. Pale and insignificant, yet lumens measured above that of Kanye, my good sir. A slight, pleasing better upon the palate, but not worth a spin or a needle drop. In Frank's Ocean, the waves do not crash, the tides do not ebb, nor do they flow, a fetid gene pool where water runs not. The Clash, you good sirs and lovely madams, for the ladies we are wont to appease, in such a bout cannot be closely matched. The ocean cannot swell, cannot sustain, cannot endure with men of strings and drum, for they shall smite him thus, with raging beats, with great distortion, with loud angry cries, without device programmed to repeat. 'Tis better to burn out and clash among gods than be caught in an ocean of shit. Thank you, good sirs.
Thank
you, counselor.
That was beautiful.
That was That was something. Scott, you still cherishing that decision to go second?
No. It's all good, man. I mean, well, Cory, much like you, I approached this from that same angle, but I thought, no, iambic pentameter is a little bit too staid and,
pretentious. You can say
it's a little pretentious, just to say it, but you did really well. Anyway, no, I'm just gonna kind of freeform it here. Okay, Frank Ocean. He's like a red popsicle that when you bite into it, it tastes like an old shoe. It's just not right. And you're like, why? Why does this taste like an old shoe? Because it's auto-tune. Auto-tune, my friend, is the bane, is the curse of all R&B. And what bothers me the most is that he has 4 whole albums. And this is, 1 video album, 2 studio albums, 1 mix album, and 8 music videos. But again, the red popsicle, just that flavorless, watery drip. It's not memorable. It's not delicious. It's nothing you'll remember. You'll just pee it out.
Are you yielding the remainder of your time at this point?
I'm not done. Well, I was going to talk about Keith Urban a little bit too, but I mean, I didn't feel like I was thinking maybe later we could do a duet with like Sarah Michelle Gellar or somebody, and I don't know why I thought of that, but definitely Keith Urban. I thought, well, him because he's kind of short. And who's that chick he's married to? Sarah, what's her? Yeah, that chick. Yeah. She's like fucking tall. I mean, like, what the hell, man? Well, I'm just saying, maybe Keith Urban's really hung. That's all I was gonna say.
Scott, you do realize you were supposed to be advocating for the album, right?
I just didn't find anything redeeming in that.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't even know why it was called Blonde. You can concede if you want, I guess. Okay. I'm just being real honest here. It's like, I suffered through that album. That was awful. That was like having to listen to, it wasn't like having to listen to Kanye.
But still, you were not a fan. I'm assuming.
Afraid not.
Okay. So my first question to you is,
I know
you've been picking pastries.
Yeah.
And you went with a popsicle. I mean, that really does speak volumes to how you really felt about this guy.
Yeah,
he didn't even make it as a baked good.
Oh, but Scott, I mean, it also demonstrates that Scott is a Renaissance man. I mean, he knows his baked goods, but he also knows his frozen treats as well.
Well, that's just it. I know that the popsicle is probably the weakest of the frozen treats because it just melts. And if it's one of those store-bought red, fucking popsicle brand, or worse, one of those Otter Pop things, those little nightmares you used to get when you were a kid. The little plastic tubes, yeah.
Part of your disappointment may stem from buying the old shoe flavor. I mean, they do have other flavors that beyond old shoe.
They probably do, but I think Frank really just nailed the old shoe thing. I mean, and not intentionally. It's like it looked red, and you thought, oh, it's going to taste red, and you're like, oh fuck, it's an old shoe.
It's an old shoe. Yeah. Sure. All right, so here's a couple of questions I want to throw at you guys. Let's talk a little bit about innovation here. Between these 2 albums, which ones do you think? When I think about these, when I think about what The Clash did, and when I think about what Frank Ocean has done, and granted, I understand you weren't a fan, but when I sort of listen to the innovation on that album, what I wonder is, which one of the 2 do you think was really, within their genres, within their time period, was really breaking the mold more? Because in my view, they both did to a certain degree, and there's a question here. Of course, you have to judge The Clash by the era which they were in. I mean, Frank Ocean is a hell of a lot more recent, but...
Yeah, that's just it, is I didn't feel like Frank Ocean really brought anything to the table as far as new, or I didn't feel he was even innovative. I read that he was hailed as some kind of R&B Renaissance dude, and no, I disagree. Somebody paid to have him stuck in there, it feels like. He was just some shill. I still think, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman, man, they would have made it much better.
So almost by default, Scott, your position is The Clash was more innovative than Frank Ocean.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The Clash was not necessarily more innovative, but certainly more in touch with their times, I think. I don't really feel like the Frank Ocean was, to me, it's like that didn't scream R&B at all. It screamed auto-tune and a lot of program stuff.
And the Ramones tie-in here. It was The Clash that saw the Ramones and realized that they didn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. That's true. In terms of the Clash, and back on this theme of innovation, so let's then focus on what the Clash did and their sort of impact. They were certainly not, you just said it, Cory, they were not the first punk band, right? Most people accept that was the Ramones, really, that sort of kind of largely created the punk genre. The Clash comes along later, after getting, as you noted, partly inspired by the Ramones. What's different? Why would people say that the Clash is the greatest punk band in history? What sets them apart from what the Ramones were doing, or going forward, what sets them apart from what the Sex Pistols ultimately did? Why is the Clash different from other punk acts?
I don't think they're that much different. I think they do have their own distinct sound. I think when you look at like the Sex Pistols, maybe they were a little bit angrier, and I think that's where, punk kind of veered in that direction. The Clash certainly did give them the sound and the freedom to go, here's a raw sound. Here is, the distortion, and here are just the drums and everything. And we're not going to overproduce this. We're not going to do a lot of mixing. We're just going to give it to you like it sounds on stage. And I think that's the one thing I like about punk. When you listen to the album, it's like a live band in a studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's raw, and you feel that energy.
That's what I take away from it as well. And yeah, I mean, Cory, you spoke about the Pistols, and it's like, yeah, the Pistols, while they may have had a lot of, Johnny Rotten had a bunch of political ideas tossed in there, but the Clash, I guess to a certain degree, they did as well. So there was that angst that came with the whole punk movement, at least early on in the punk movement, because bands like the Plasmatics and the Ramones were much more hardcore about the punk movement, I thought, than, say, the Clash. The Clash were almost like the poppy ska in.
And I think that's especially true, like, once they go, not so much on this album, but like once they go further into their career, they started, some of their songs are like downright mellow later on.
Yeah.
They start pulling in, and there's a little bit of this on this album, but later you hear it more. They start pulling in more outside influences like reggae and blues and other stuff coming into it.
But I mean, that happened with a lot of punk too, is it blended with ska, and you got that West Coasty, the No Doubt sound kind of thing.
And I mean, the reggae and ska, the Police were considered a punk band at first.
True.
Yeah,
True.
so were the Talking Heads, which, like, in hindsight feels like a weird statement.
It does.
Doesn't it?
I mean, both of them, you're like, yeah, I can see where they have that drive. They have that kind of backbeat that was punk, but they then took it to the next step. And I think that the Clash were doing that too. And with punk, I just always think it's kind of like it's almost like jazz in a way, because it is very free form. I mean, when we try to play some Ramon songs and there's these weird change ups and they don't follow, the chorus is like going to be 4 this time. Next time it's going to be 5. The verse is going to be 6 instead of 8. I mean, it was a rebellion against everything that was coming out of the 60s. It was a rebellion almost to disco as well. They're like, fuck this. We're doing it our way. We're just going to go out there and we're just going to make noise. And I mean, it was the perfect answer to disco.
Yes, it really was.
More so than metal, as much as metal was too. But the punk just, it really was a punch in the face. I mean, they were doing the early mosh pits and spitting on people and fighting in the crowds. I mean, that's what it was.
A lot of the punk angst went into the metal angst, and that's where you got the death metal, the black metal, and the punk infused that, I think, because then you had that early on. Punk was, like I said, there was a lot more anger there.
There was.
So yeah, and like I said, bands like Plasmatics, man. Wendy Williams, chainsaws on stage, blowing up cars on stage. Come on.
All right. We've been talking for a few minutes now. Any closing statements before I retire to make my judgment?
Yeah. Frank Ocean huffs donkey chode.
Okay.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yeah. All right.
I rest my case.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
Yes.
All right. We'll be back in a moment. So this week on the show, we have a brand new sponsor, Big Richard's Meat Emporium and Fine Dining. Really fantastic place. They've got a deli where you can take home some of your own ingredients to cook up something special. Or if you prefer to dine in, there's a whole restaurant section where you can really enjoy it. And all three of us paid them a little visit recently. Cory or Scott, let's talk about the deli first. What were you guys? What were your takeaways there? Do you see anything you like?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. The girls there, I gotta say, at the meat counter, they really love their meat there. And they will cut it up for you. They'll shell out. You can get meat by the inch, meat by the foot. Whatever you want, you can get it there.
Wow. You know what I really appreciated about the deli counter was I'm a big fan of some things that are a little more exotic, and they actually had a lot of wild game where they was able to get some really tasty beaver. And then additionally, they carry moose knuckle. They actually fly it in every day from Lapland. It was really fantastic.
The moose knuckle. I'll have to try that.
All right, now back to the show.
Richards, meat.
One of the things I enjoy about doing this podcast, it is a ton of work. I mean, we don't, none of us get paid. For like folks listening to this, we're not making money off of this. We're doing this because we're three guys that like sitting around talking about music. But there is a lot of work that goes into it, and just not just the time to listen to the albums, but the time to like look up notes and cross-reference things and sort of build in this particular situation, sort of build your case for why you think one album is better than another. One of the rewards is when you get to discover something that you wouldn't have otherwise discovered, for me anyway. And I'm talking about Frank Ocean here. I would have never sat down and listened to that album but for doing this podcast. Frankly, the odds are I will never sit down and listen to the album again. It wasn't that I particularly loved the album. In a lot of respects, it took me by surprise. There is a lot of stuff on that album that is unpredictable. Sort of every time you think you know where it's going. I mean, Cory, you were talking about the Ramones and the free form and the unpredictable changes. There's a lot of that on this album, too. Let's just say this. I came into it not expecting this to be a tricky decision in any way, but it was closer than I would have expected.
Dude, you pick Frank Ocean. We're going to go burn shit.
I'm going to go set a dog on fire if you do that.
There is... Oh, God. No. So here's the thing. I'm not picking Frank Ocean. For me, this comes down to like the impact of the two records. When I think about what The Clash did, and when I think about the people that did pick up that mantle and run with it, like the Sex Pistols, like these other acts that came along, there's a deep, deep influence from that album. The stuff that Frank Ocean did on his album, more interesting than I expected it to be, but it certainly hasn't had that kind of influential effect yet. And so at the end of the day, I got to go with The Clash.
Thank you.
All right. Woohoo!
All right.
1-0. 1-0. Undefeated.
Oh, I never got to say, too, The Clash for me was pecan pie. That rustic, kind of crunchy.
I'm sorry, it only counts if you say it. Sorry, it only counts if you say it on iambic pentameter.
Had you said that earlier, Dave probably would have talked for less time.
Good point. But he did make a nice case for Frank Ocean.
He did, but you could have swayed him a lot faster with the pecan pie.
Yeah, probably.
All right, let's take another break and talk a little bit more about our sponsor. We told you about the deli counter at Big Richard's. Now let's talk a little bit about the restaurant side. All three of us sat down, had a fine little meal. I'll actually start talking about my experience. Actually, we had a great evening. Our server Peter was fantastic. We opted for the all-you-can-eat special, and so what Peter did is they bring over this little bell, right, and they set it on the table, and you eat. They leave you alone to eat in peace, but then when you want a little bit more, you just give Peter a little bit of ding-a-ling, and he comes right back over. We started with the charcuterie plate, which was fantastic. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff on there that you would expect, salami, sausages, but also a couple of extras. They had these sort of their variation on deviled eggs. They called them huevos de un scroto. I don't know exactly what that means, but they're really fantastic. Off to the side, they had a little sack of nuts. There was a gherkin, little salty mayo. Fantastic. Then we moved on. We had the soup course. We had the clam chowder. And then one had tried the surf and turf, actually, which is 6 inches of kielbasa, but then they stuff it in a clam, which is fantastic. But if you're not a big fan of meat, don't worry. They have a lot of options for vegetarians. There's the cucumber and plum salad. They've got the Fermunda cheese plate. And a big basket of their famous whisker biscuits, which are fantastic. And by the way, if you want a little pro tip, try them out with a little bit of that salty mayo. In my opinion, really the crown jewels of the menu. For the kids, they will love the Franks and Beans or the nuggets. Beverages, they have a variety of tea bags available. Or make your way over to the bar. I really had a nice conversation with the bartender, John Thomas, and he can crank out one of his famous protein shakes. I got to tell you, I had so much energy. I was just full of spunk the rest of the day. It was fantastic.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
But anyway, so we had a great evening.
Big Richards, meat.
All right, so round 2.
Where are we?
The band and the Who.
Dun, dun, dun. Only teenage wasteland. What?
I will go first. Okay. So I'm going to start here by talking about a completely different band. I'm going to talk about Cream. Cream was largely considered one of the first supergroup. Comes together in 1966. And in fact, they chose their name because of their reputation. The Cream refers to, they referred to themselves as the cream of the crop, and they ultimately got shortened to Cream. They went on to have a huge career, and yet just 2 years after they formed, they called it quits. They broke up, they went their separate ways. You were at the top of your game, you're selling millions of records, you got sold out tours, you've only been doing it for 2 years. Why do you walk away? Well, something else happened in 1968, and that was the release of this album, Music from Big Pink by the band. It was the first album by them. They were Bob Dylan's former backing band. What they ended up creating here was arguably the greatest ensemble in rock and roll history. Usually when you think of any group that hits it big, you've got somebody in that band who stands out, right? Whether either because they've got an outsized personality or outsized talent. For every Rolling Stones, there's a Mick Jagger, right? For every Beatles, there's a Lennon. The band was huge for a decade and sold millions of albums, yet most people could not name a single member. And that's because they worked together so well. They fed off of each other. I'll come back to Cream. This album comes out, copy of it finds its way to Eric Clapton, and I'll just let him say it. This is from his memoir in 2007. It stopped me in my tracks, and it highlighted all the problems I thought Cream had. Here was a band that was really doing it right, incorporating influences from country, music, blues, jazz, rock, and writing great songs. I was frantically looking for a yardstick, and here it was. It made me feel like we were stuck, and I wanted out. And just a few weeks later, Eric Clapton announced that Cream was breaking up. This album was so good, it broke up a supergroup because they figured they would never touch it. That's as good as an endorsement as I can give it.
Yeah, okay. I felt they were kind of a little strawberry rhubarb pie-ish. That's just the baked good vibe they gave me. I liked the album, actually. It wasn't bad. I enjoyed it.
All right, Scott, 2 minutes are on the clock.
Well, Keith Moon. Need I say more?
Wait,
Yeah.
we're done here. Yep, Keith
Right,
Moon.
right.
Sorry, we're adjourned. No.
Baba O'Reilly. Need I say any more? In 2003, Rolling Stone had a top 500 albums, and this album, Who's Next, ranked 28th on that list. But still, that I thought was interesting. I mean, this album, so much of it's good. I mean, there was Going Mobile, a lot of Townsend stuff on it, where Townsend sang even. There was an Entwistle track even where he sang, and that was not as popular, but still, I mean, it's got Bargain on it. And these guys pumped out 12 studio albums, 16 live albums, 21 compilations, 23 video albums. And they're like the Boston cream pie of the baked goods, I think. A little highfalutin and way up in the calories, because damn, it's just good for you. It's good stuff. Great album. All right. Again, Keith Moon, not Keith Urban, not to be mistaken with Keith Urban. I don't think Keith Urban ever recorded with The Who. I don't think Nicole Kidman did either. I'm pretty sure she didn't. Did Sarah Michelle Gellar ever get in with him? I think she and Robert, was it Robert Plant? No, what was his fucking name?
She was in the video with Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah,
she was in Sour Girl.
No.
You're confused. Oh, hold on.
Roger Daltrey.
Roger Daltrey? That was what you're trying to come up with?
Yeah. Daltrey. Sorry. Senior moment there. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, Roger Daltrey and Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Okay. I think we can go right to the open discussion. Dave, what do you have?
Well, you know what? I'm actually going to yield to Scott here.
No, you know what? You had a beautiful, though. That was a really good argument. I really enjoyed that album. Music from Big Pink was actually very good. However, is it on the same level as Who's Next? No, I don't think so.
That's where I was. Music from Big Pink was great. I mean, comparatively to what we heard in the Basement tapes, kind of an unfair fight. The Who's Next is a solid piece of rock history here.
It's just that's a sledgehammer.
I mean, we could talk about the innovation with all of the
sequencers,
the synthesizers, the sequence synthesizers.
He was using sequencers, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody's playing in time with them as well, which is, never easy, especially on some of those songs.
No, you have to be rock solid on time. We would have had a lot of problems with that.
Yeah, can we say this, though? Pete Townsend is a pretentious son of a bitch. I mean, so pretentious. Tommy was already pretentious. There's a lot of songs on here that are very pretentious. I mean, a lot of this comes from, this was originally supposed to be the great rock opera follow-up to Tommy called Lifehouse. Right. Yet another ostentatious rock opera from Pete Townsend. Let me just give you the plot of Lifehouse. Lifehouse is set in a future society where music is banned. Most of the population lives indoors in government-controlled experience suits. A rebel, Bobby, broadcast rock music into the suits, allowing people to remove them and become more enlightened. Now, if that sounds simultaneously stupid and familiar, it's because it's basically just Footloose. So, but Mr. Rock and Roll Genius Pete Townsend, congratulations. You couldn't bring this thing together, and yet fucking Kenny Loggins pulled it off.
Wait, if he plays the rock music into the suit and they take the suit off, then they stop listening to the rock music and they put the suit back on.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right. There's plot holes in it.
But
Even worse.
And then you have Sarah Michelle Gellar with Robert Plant.
No, Roger Daltrey. But then you have the Who in your soul,
right?
And then you can stay up late and watch CSI.
And you are one with
any city.
Talking about putting the Who in your soul. So let's talk about that for a second. Meher Baba, who I never had heard of prior to this, but apparently he was a guru, spiritual leader, and Pete Townsend was a big follower of him. So back to Pete's pretentiousness. He wanted to take Meher Baba's vital signs, plug them into a synthesizer, and have it generate music based on that data. You talked about Baba O'Reilly. You ever wonder why it's called Baba O'Reilly and not Teenage Wasteland? Because he named it after friggin' Meher Baba for no goddamn reason whatsoever. The song Bargain, people think it's a love song. It's actually all about, he's actually said in an interview, it's all about his devotion to giving up himself so he can follow Meher Baba more deeply. Pretentious. Baba O'Reilly was originally 30 minutes long. They had to talk him into cutting it down. I'm not making that up. That's a real...
Somebody's had one too many red popsicles.
Oh, wait, one more thing I want to mention. Speaking of Baba O'Reilly, I'm not a huge sports guy. I know other people are. I'm not a huge sports guy. Let's talk about Baba O'Reilly and sports for a second. The LA Lakers, three-peat champions in 2000, 2001, and 2002, and in 2003, they changed their introduction music to Baba O'Reilly and didn't win another championship for 6 years. It's the entrance music for the New York Rangers, who haven't won the Stanley Cup since the mid-90s. If you're more of a fan of college football, it's played before every Georgia Bulldog game, who hasn't won a national championship since 1980. There's a curse. There's a sports curse with that song. And I think we have to say it, Pete Townsend's a pedophile.
That's not proven. And
he was arrested in 2003 for possession of child pornography.
He was.
So do we call him a pederast here?
Maybe Pete the pederast. Petey pederast. Petey pedo.
Baba Onambla.
Oh.
All right. And now a word from our sponsor while I deliberate. And back with more on Big Richard's Meataporium and Fine Dining. Scott, what was your experience?
Well, I went in and tried the House Challenge, which is the meter of meat.
Wow.
And you can have Big Richard's meter of meat. Boy, let me tell you, they serve it to you in a trough, and they give you a bib.
Really?
Which is more like a towel. And, so you can, I guess you get the meat sweats or whatever. And, so it's in this trough, and, I had a pretty hard time choking down all that meat. But but if you do get through it, you get your picture on the wall, and you get a little, T-shirt says, I survived Big Richard's meat challenge.
Is this like a whole big meter of like beef?
No. This is a meter of all sorts of meat. They threw in a bunch of exotic stuff, things I wasn't expecting. Kangaroo, elephant, elk, duck, a little bit of goldfish even, they told me. I can't say I really noticed that. They had, I believe it was basset hound.
Basset hound? Wow.
Yeah, very exotic. Rattlesnake.
Is that like a different kind of fish, like when they say dolphin, but it's really a fish, or is it like basset hound?
Well, it had kind of a doggy smell to it, so, maybe it was basset hound. I don't know, maybe, who knows. So, yeah, getting through that meat was a lot, but it was well worth it. And, when I was done, I too got my picture on the wall at Big Richard's Meat Emporium.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out next time I'm there. Yeah, and make sure you bring the family. I mentioned the kids menu, but they have a lot of activities too to keep, kids can get a little rambunctious in a restaurant sometimes. We all know that. But they got a lot of activities to keep your kids occupied so you can have a nice, relaxing meal with your significant other. They got a petting zoo. All the kids there really seem to enjoy riding the baloney pony. And if you go around back, you'll find the cornhole. Where people can, take a little time and relax and enjoy a drink and play a little game. It's just a really fun, casual atmosphere. You don't have to get dressed up. Ladies, just wear something comfortable. And guys, jack it off. It's fine.
All right, and we're back. Anyone have any final words before I give my my final say here? All right.
I don't think I can add anything. I already ran my mouth way too long, so.
I came into this Okay.
Good.
Always big with The Who. Always loved this album. I had a tough time. I've been sitting in chambers back here. I had to take my pants off to think this through.
Well, of course.
Yes, you can't think with your pants on.
No.
I was swayed by Dave's argument with the comparison with Cream. I thought the supergroup thing and how it changed Eric Clapton. But Eric Clapton's also a big pretentious prick. So in the end, I gotta stick my pretentious pricks together. And I'm going to go with The Who.
I don't think you could say stick your pretentious pricks together, Henry.
You could rub them together, maybe, side by side.
Sword fight.
Like windshield wipers.
Double barrel. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, that's a horrible thought, Pete Townsend and Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton's like one of those anti-vax psychos, too.
Yes, Eric Clapton does have some weird fucking beliefs, I will give you that.
He does.
In all honesty, this was a tough call. The band album was very, very good. I mean, those guys were incredibly talented. I can see why Dylan
Winner
used
in
them.
your face, bitch! Sorry. Anyway.
For what it's worth, you're right. I was advocating for the band because I was supposed to come in advocating for the band, but in my opinion, yeah, absolutely, The Who was the better album here.
And you did.
You did.
Phenomenal
yeah.
job. And in comparison to Cream, what you had to say was good. So
No, it was worth hearing. It was well worth
The thing with the band album is this is not the band at their best, honestly. The band turned into a outright phenomenal group, but the first album, in my opinion, this first album, they were just scratching the surface. When you get to things like The Last Waltz before they kind of hung it up for good, way, way better.
And another one of those bands that just quit when they were on top.
Yeah.
You've named it. Cream, the band, and then, like I said earlier, the Police.
For a group that, I talked about all this great ensemble, and they really did work incredibly well together. There weren't a lot of egos in terms of stealing the spotlight,
right.
But they hanging it up at the peak of their game. My understanding is there were a lot of tensions that developed later over royalties and stuff. So,
all right, folks. Well, that's it. Thank you for coming out. We'll catch you next time.
Praise Satan!
Thanks, everybody.
But oh my God, you realize that it's kind of like Red Lobster. You get to go in and choose the meat you want from the petting zoo.
Oh my God!
The magic of radio.